Welcome into Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phillies baseball for years over at 97.5 Fanatic on the radio. Now, happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today, a lot of awesome content for you on the episode. We're ranking the NL East managers. Where does Joe Girardi stand? I might be a little bit tougher on him than you may think. Also, another high-profile free agent spotlight, a guy that's been linked to the Phillies literally for years now. Is this the offseason where he finally dons the red and white pinstripes? And finally, we're going to wrap up with stepping off, a look at the radio broadcast, some changes for the Phillies, a fun little look at who's going to be in the booth, and some new faces that you may already be familiar with that. All of that coming up just in a second, right here on Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So today, we have a very interesting ranking in the NL East. The NL East managers and where they stack up. Baseball, it's kind of interesting because a manager's effect on the game a lot of times can be subjective. I could view things that Joe Girardi, for example, who we'll talk about here, does a certain way. He could view it totally different. Obviously, he does. He agrees with the calls that he makes. You would hope another manager who's very good at his job could view it a totally different way. You have analytics in the mix. You have old school thought in the mix. And the NL East is very interesting because a lot of these names, high-profile guys that have been around the game for a long time, that deserve the utmost respect in that position. It's tough to rank them, but I did. So let's get into it, starting with number 5. So in last place, I have to put, and it's interesting when you hear this name, you don't necessarily think about a last place manager. Part of it's the fault of his team, but I'm going with Don Mattingly of the Miami Marlins. Now, Mattingly's been the manager of the Marlins since 2016. He has some tenure there. He feels like he's kind of newer to the division, but he's actually had a couple years, been with the Marlins for 6 years now. This will be his 7th coming up. Unfortunately, his record with the Marlins, 374 and 494, 120 games under 500. You can't think back to the times where he was manager of the Dodgers for 5 years and had some better teams there, some 90-win seasons near the end of his time in Los Angeles. Now, part of it is the organization not giving him stuff to work with. We know the Marlins' history with selling off some of their better players. They were kind of the Pittsburgh Pirates before the Pittsburgh Pirates came around, of getting rid of guys like Giancarlo Stanton who go and be great somewhere else. Stuff like that. So it could not be necessarily his fault. Part of it, I'm sure, plays into it just being the manager of the Miami Marlins. You get the hand you're dealt by an organization that's had trouble, but he hasn't really been doing himself any favors yet. I believe his only playoff appearance was in the shortened season when they went 2 games over 500, 31 and 29 in that 60-game season in 2020. And the rest of the time, he hasn't had a season above 500 in Miami. Could this be the year? He's got a lot of young up-and-coming talent. Maybe his veteran knowledge is enough to boost them up, but it's a tough division. I don't see them getting much better, and there's only so much Mattingly can do. He may be more of a victim of circumstance, but I have him ranked as the 5th best manager in the NL East this year. Now, the 4th best manager, this guy, a recent World Series winner. And there are 3 previous World Series winners in division, one obviously the most recent, who we'll get to coming up. But now I'm talking about Davey Martinez, the manager of the Washington Nationals, only ever managed the Nationals, only been in the seat over there, the manager's position, for 4 years, since 2018. His record, slightly below 500 at 266 and 280. What bumps him above Mattingly, though? World Series champion back in 2019. Did an incredible job managing that team that got hot at the right time. The issue and the reason why he's in 4th place now is they went out after that and they tried to go ahead and basically retool, and it fell apart. Guys like Patrick Corbin didn't really play out. Now you're in a position where you're moving on from Trey Turner. Max Scherzer goes to the Dodgers this past trade deadline, and now he pitches in division for the New York Mets. You've lost some guys because of the failure to perform. I mean, you go 65 and 97 in 2021. That's the mark of an absolute dumpster fire of a season. And they had talent. They have one of the better hitters in the game in Juan Soto, maybe the best for some people's money. Davey Martinez definitely has a target on his back. And while they are rebuilding, he's going to have a much stronger managerial performance in 2022 if he wants to keep his job safe down there in Washington. A lot of times a manager will get a year or two of a rebuild, but they have to show the ability to bring along some of this young talent that they want to rebuild their organization with down in Washington if he wants to keep that position. It'll be an interesting year for Davey Martinez. I don't have all that much faith in him with the roster as currently constructed. That's why I have him in 4th place in the NL East. He's probably the least proven, which is funny to say about a guy who's won the World Series, but the names you hear, Mattingly being the first, we'll get into some other names that are just associated with the game of baseball. Davey Martinez, he's a guy that's a little bit newer to the managerial position, even though he's already won a World Series. I've got him at 4. Now at 3, this is the biggest wild card in the division because he's a newcomer, a new hire in the NL East, taking over the post as manager of the New York Mets. Now he's familiar with New York. He started his career with the Yankees way back in 92. Of course, I'm talking about Buck Showalter. Now, you might remember him with the Orioles. He spent how many years? Like 9 years down there in Baltimore, longtime manager of the Orioles. Has not really had the success you think about when you think about Buck Showalter. When you think about him, you think, oh, he's a veteran. He's been around for a while. He hasn't won significantly, no World Series to his name, but he seems to just be a solid manager when he goes places. Well, his career record, 15-51 and 15-17. It does echo that. He's won more games than he's lost. Now, most recently with Baltimore, he was a little bit below 500, but that team is similar to the Marlins in what that organization has put together. They've had a rough go of it in the mid-2010s, really since 2010. They have one playoff appearance, I believe, where they made a little bit of a hot run, and then maybe 2. And I'm remembering the Ubaldo Jimenez relief appearance rather than going with Britton, the closer, who's having an amazing year. They just go ahead and mess that all up. All of this is all recapping to say that Buck Showalter, he's been around the game for a really long time. And I think the point behind this hire by the Mets is Steve Cohen looks at a team that he's going to throw a ridiculous amount of money at and say, I just need to bring in a proven veteran guy that's not going to mess it up, that's not going to make waves, that knows how to handle a locker room, that can put a confident lineup card out and just let the guys I'm paying ridiculous amounts of money go out and play. I think Buck Showalter is a great guy for that job. He makes me nervous about the Mets because even though he hasn't won a World Series, he's a guy that's been proven to know how to manage teams at the major league level for decades now. So he's a wild card. He could be really good. We haven't seen him. He's going to have a very talented roster. That's why I have him right in the middle at 3rd in the division. Coming in 2nd, and I'm very critical of this guy on a day-to-day basis during the season. At least I was this past year. I've got Phillies manager Joe Girardi as the 2nd best manager in the NL East. Now, you listen to that as a Phillies fan who's ingrained with the team, and you're like, man, he seems like he always makes the wrong decisions with pitching. He had a terrible stretch last year where he was like going ahead and going to the bullpen to try and bring in a guy who wasn't on the lineup card, and he didn't check that. He's going multiple mound visits and forgetting how many mound visits he took, so he's got to take out a pitcher without someone ready to come in the game. He's arguing with Gene Segura at points in the dugout and getting caught on camera doing that. This past year was frustrating, it seemed, for Girardi. And with the bullpen he's been given in his first 2 years as Phillies manager, you can understand that. Not a lot of great options so far. The fact of the matter is, he's still a really good manager on the overarching scope of Major League Baseball. He's a World Series champion from back in the Yankees, 2009. Of course, they knocked off the Phillies to do that. He was the National League Manager of the Year in 2006 with the Miami Marlins in his first and only season down there in Miami as a rookie manager, taking home that award. He still has the pedigree, and his time with the Phillies, his record hasn't been awful. He's 110 and 112. He's only 2 games below 500, which you'd like to see a team with the NL MVP and the NL Cy Young runner-up be better than 500. That's the goal. And we expect that from Joe Girardi this season. But on scope of an average MLB manager. He's above average. He's got the pedigree. I've got him at number 2, even though I'm critical of him because I think he has more in the tank. But he's a guy that's going to give you consistency, proven veteran leadership, and he's going to win games wherever he goes. So Joe Girardi, number 2. Number 1, though, the hottest manager in the NL East, maybe in baseball right now, Brian Snitker. Of course, the Braves World Series champions last year. We know the magical run that they went on, doing that without the ace of your staff and Mike Soroka, doing that without Ronald Acuna, your best player. It was an amazing managerial performance by Brian Snitker last year. He's been a solid manager in Atlanta since 2016 when he took over that position. Career record of 441 and 390. He's only ever been with Atlanta. It's all he knows. Manage the Braves, win games, be over 500. He's done it in every season over the past 4 years. And the first couple, he was a little bit below, but they were kind of in a bit of a rebuild going into the later Freddie Freeman era, bringing in Ronald Acuna, bringing in Ozzie Albies, getting Dansby Swanson settled in the middle of the infield, building in what we know now to be this generation of Braves players. He's done an excellent job with that, specifically in a vacuum. He did an excellent job last year of putting together a World Series winning team and managing that team through a very competitive playoff run. I've got to give him number 1. When the guy who is the defending World Series manager, you got to give it to him. He's also a manager of the year in, I believe, 2018. He won that award in the National League. So there you have it. Brian Snitker, the number 1 manager in the NL East, but Girardi number 2. Not bad. I know I said in the open, I kind of went misdirection on you a little bit. I'm overly critical of him on day-to-day, but when you look at the scope, he's a great manager. Hopefully, he manages up to it this year. Now, on the other side, we're going to talk about a great player, a versatile player, and like I said, a player who's been linked to the Phillies for years. Maybe this is the offseason that he actually ends up here. A lot of ties to Philly. We'll talk about that in just a second. First, though, I want to talk to you about Mission Possible. Are you ready to discover your purpose and leave an impact wherever you go? Mission Possible, written and read by New York Times bestselling author and athlete Tim Tebow. You guys know Tebow, come on. He's a sports icon. This book encourages you to find your inspiration, pursue your purpose, and create a life for yourself that counts. Ignite a new spark in your life through this new inspirational listen. Think about it. Think about that Florida speech he gave post-game when he was in college. It's one of the highlights of college football of all time. You get that inspiration daily? Man, that would fire me up. I know it would. Mission Possible by Tim Tebow is available everywhere audiobooks are sold. All right, our free agent spotlight today. He's a guy that you're very familiar with if you followed Phillies baseball. Also, if you followed baseball in the Windy City up in Chicago, I'm talking about Kris Bryant. I'm not even going to label a position on Kris Bryant because one of my favorite things about him as a player is his versatility in the field. Came up as a third baseman. You remember him as a third baseman on that World Series winning team that broke the long drought in Chicago for the Cubs, taking down the Cleveland Indians back in 2016. Well, he can also play outfield. He can shift around the outfield. He's a versatile defender. And with so many necessary spots to be filled in the Phillies defense, we talked about it in Monday's episode, ranking them as the worst defensive team in the NL East. Well, Kris Bryant can certainly help with that, and he can help at the dish too. And the best part, so you've heard about him tied to the Phillies in trade talks and everything for years. Last year, there was a little bit of conversation at the deadline. Will the Phillies go ahead and give up what's needed to be done to bring Kris Bryant to Philadelphia? Well, ultimately, they didn't. He went out to San Francisco, spent the rest of 2021 with the Giants. Unfortunately for that team, they fell short, even though they were one of the hottest teams in baseball. Really the surprise of the major leagues last year, but he did not play out in San Francisco. And the reason he was moved is he was on an expiring contract. He is now officially a free agent, and he's available to be signed by anybody, which includes your Philadelphia Phillies, and they have been enamored with Bryant for a while. He's one of those guys that's always been in the rumor mill in Philadelphia for a couple of reasons. One, he's a great player. Just listen to some of these career numbers. He's a career 278 hitter. He's going to give you, let's just look through how many bombs he gives you a year. Something around 25 to 30, maybe, especially in Citizens Bank Park with a hitter's park. His peak, 2016, that year the Cubs won the World Series, dude hit 39 home runs in Wrigley. I understand sometimes the wind pushes out, but there's times where the wind pushes in. It can be a tougher park to hit in. He led the league in runs that year, and he's become an incredible player. Of course, he's an MVP winner in that 2016 season. So that tells you all you need to know about the numbers that he put up. But hey, this is 2022 now. What can he give the Phillies currently? Well, last year, his total numbers, let's go ahead and look at it. He put up a 265 batting average, which you'd like to see better, but he had 25 homers, had 73 RBIs. I would absolutely take those numbers from Bryant. Add that in with a Bryce Harper, a Rhys Hoskins, a JT Realmuto. Maybe add in another free agent to DH, and you've got yourself an incredibly potent offense. I should mention Gene Segura as well, being a solid top of the lineup hitter. This is a team that looks incredibly dangerous if you add Bryant into the mix. And also what he does is you can place him at third base and take care of Alec Boehm having to ever play that position again. Put Alec Boehm in the designated hitter spot. Keep Rhys Hoskins at first. We talked about it in our off the pole segment. I know responders, you wanted to see Rhys Hoskins spend more time at designated hitter. But if you can fill the third baseman role with Kris Bryant, hey, that opens up that role for Alec Boehm to shift over. Also, you have two open outfield spots. If Kris Bryant can go out and play left, man, who cares in center with your corner outfielders being Kris Bryant and Bryce Harper, two former MVPs, one the reigning? Man, I'll take that every single day. And speaking of Bryce Harper, another reason why Kris Bryant has been so strongly tied, well, him and Bryce Harper have a great relationship. They've been friends and tight for years. They also share the same representation. Scott Boras represents both of them. Of course, he's a super agent. He represents a lot of these guys. But there is that I'm getting so excited about Kris Bryant, I can barely talk. There is that relationship between Boras and the Phillies, Bryant and Harper. There's a lot of cross-pollination here between these sides. That's why it's been rumored for so long, and it's why it's being rumored again now. Everyone's looking at okay, who do we get in the outfield? Do we get a Conforto? Do we get a Castellanos? Who comes and plays DH? Do we go out and do the Phillies sign Kyle Schwarber to fill that role? Big power bat. Well, Kris Bryant's almost been in the news so much for the Phillies that he's fallen under the radar this time. He's a guy that would be a great fit at multiple positions. He would be a middle of the lineup bat. He's a proven winner. He's been there before. He has a World Series under his belt. He could be a leader. He could be a just great addition to this team. And I would love to see the Phillies, even if they don't go as high enough to pay him, you got to sniff around at what Bryant's asking price is in free agency this year. He's too talented not to give him a look, and he may be too talented to not bring him in. I would love him to be wearing red pinstripes this year. So fingers crossed that Bryant, that cool hair, the dope shades he's always got on, that's something we see at Citizens Bank Park every day this year. Now, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. I also want you to check out Locked On Prospects, though. Locked On MLB Prospects is awesome. Lindsey Crosby is great. He's a prospect encyclopedia. You heard our crossover last week where we talked about the Phillies minor league system. Some guys like Bryson Stott, Mick Abel, Andrew Painter, some of the young guys who are going to affect this team for years to come. Well, go ahead and check out Locked On MLB Prospects so you can get even more of that information across the MLB. Lindsey's always doing a deep dive on prospects and college players from everywhere around the country, around the world. Go ahead and make sure you check that out. Now, on the other side, we're going to do our stepping off segment where we take a front step away from the strategy of the game, the managers and ranking, what goes on the field, talk a little bit about the radio broadcast and some changes that are coming to your listening experience for the Phillies in 2022. All right, folks, you know what time it is. I got to tell you about my friends over at Built Bar. Man, it was like 75 degrees earlier this week here in Philly. You know what that means? Beach season right around the corner. And the best way to do it, you got to get into protein bars. Of course, that's the way you build up the muscles. Come on, I'm doing protein. Look at that. That's a shameless plug right there. And the way I do it is Built Bar. They're the best protein bar out there because they taste just so much better. They taste amazing. You got 100% chocolate. You have some amazing flavors. They do marshmallow protein. Have you ever had a protein marshmallow before? No? Yeah, you got to try it. They're called their puffs. Some great flavors: cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. Man, they do it better than anybody else. It tastes just so much better, and you get the same amount of protein. You still get that 17 grams of protein. That's awesome. That'll get you right where you need to be, all jacked up for beach season, ready to go for that. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first and then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. I swear by it. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. So the numbers of makes and models, they're always going up. There's always new cars. It seems like there's a new company every day. How do you keep up with all these parts? Well, your local store, they cannot possibly do it. There's only one that can do it, and it's Rock Auto. You have computers with access to them right at home, right in your pocket. There should be no reason why you're still driving somewhere and asking them if they have the parts. It's crazy. It's antiquated. Don't do it anymore. You can save time and money when you use Rock Auto. Why are you choosing to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more on some parts when you go to your local auto parts store? It makes no sense. Now, I drive a Ford Mustang. That thing, unfortunately, it's old. It breaks down all the time. I need stuff to fix up this car day in and day out, really, which is unfortunate for my wallet. But I got it cut down on price because I go use Rock Auto. It's so much better. And they're a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers like you and me for over 20 years. Reliably low prices. It's low every time I go and shop with them, anytime I need. Brake pads, engine repair, stuff like that. Any parts that you need that fit into a car, Rock Auto's got it. So I want you to go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And make sure you write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that I sent you in. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Rock Auto. Okay, so now it's time for Stepping Off, the segment we do every Wednesday episode where we take a little bit of break from the analytics and the statistics and the rankings, and we do a little bit of something that's, of course, Phillies baseball related, but a little bit outside the realms of the actual game. And today, got some interesting news from my friends over at NBC Sports Philadelphia. By the way, shameless plug, you can see me on TV. That's right. They put this mug on TV over on NBC Sports Philadelphia. I fill in occasionally on the Mike Missinelli Show 2 to 6. Make sure you go ahead and check that out when you get a chance. You might even see this smiling face on there. Some great content from Mike, Tyrone, Jen Scordo, the normal crew, and me when I fill in. Anyway, what we're talking about in Stepping Off today is some additions to the Philadelphia Phillies radio broadcast for 2022. Now, the Phillies broadcast does this cool thing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't really, but it's an interesting thought where they bring in some part-time analysts and they bring in some, like, occasionally they'll switch up. They'll bring in this guy for one game. They'll bring in that guy for another game. They'll experiment. They'll try things. I like that a lot because, let's be honest, no disrespect to the people who do the game day in and day out. But like when you compare everything to what Harry Kalas used to be, it's hard to just imagine another voice of the Phillies, at least for me and the era I grew up in. It's hard to imagine another voice of the Phillies day in, day out. So that's why I think it's so cool that they experiment and you get to hear other voices. Well, here are the 4 new names that you're going to hear talk Phillies baseball on the radio in 2022. As of today, they're adding Michael Bourne, Chad Durbin, Eric Kratz, and Kevin Stocker to radio broadcasts coming for the 2022 season when the season gets going. So apparently that grouping, they're going to rotate through road games. So Scott Fransky is still going to go ahead and be your main guy on the radio. He's been on the radio for years. But Kevin Franson has become the Nationals TV color commentator. So Larry Anderson will still be in to call most home games, but now there's some options. to go ahead and bring in additional guys to hear what they sound like and give their perspective. Former Phillies, all of them. So Stocker, he called a couple games from 2016 to 2018. You may have heard him before, but the rest of these guys, they're new to the role. So, Michael Bourne, he was a high pick for the Phillies, base stealer, really fast guy, explosive player, very exciting. And he was we got to thank him, part of the trade for Brad Lidge back in 2008. So unfortunately, he wasn't a part of that World Series winning team, but he did help bring Brad Lidge in, who was, of course, perfect in the 2008 season. So we'll get to hear his perspective as an explosive position player and a guy who's been around baseball for a while. Chad Durbin, of course, you remember, an important bullpen piece of the 2008 championship team. He was with the team for years. He had a 2.87 ERA. Look at that. I'm reading through this article right now. I didn't realize it was this low. But and no National League reliever pitched more innings than Durbin that year. I don't have to tell you how good he was in 2008. If you were around for that team, you remember Chad Durbin and the back end of that bullpen, Durbin, Madsen, Lidge. Well, we get to hear his perspective as a relief pitcher. Probably get some great insight about this Phillies bullpen. Now, Kratz, Eric Kratz, is the most recent retiree. He was with the Yankees as recently as 2020, so he's just getting done. He was a backup catcher for a lot of his time. He did spend a good amount of his time in Philadelphia in his career in the majors. Catchers, they're very cerebral, very smart guys. Be interested to hear his perspective of pitching and also what JT Realmuto is doing behind the dish. Also position player, so he can give you a little bit of information on the approaches at the plate and everything like that. So those are the guys you're going to hear. Kevin Stocker, a guy that you've heard previously, but new faces, new voices. Michael Bourne, Chad Durbin, Eric Kratz. Hopefully they give us some great information and stuff to listen to on the Philadelphia Phillies radio broadcast in 2022 when the season gets going. That'll do it for today's episode. On Friday's episode coming up, we got some more great stuff for you. We're going to introduce something a little bit different than the regular free agent spotlight. I'll tell you more about that when that episode comes out. You'll be able to hear it in that intro. We'll also do our final ranking for the National League East teams. This is the overall ranking, where the teams rank in total. So it'll encompass everything we've already covered to this point. And we'll have the closer, where I'll introduce another off the poll and recover and go through what we went through already this week. All of that coming up on Friday. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. I've been telling you about him. Paul Francis Sullivan. Why haven't you checked him out yet? Please make sure you call him Sully. He brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues in total, past and present. He's an encyclopedia. We talked about Lindsey Crosby being an encyclopedia of prospects. Well, Sully's that guy for the MLB in general. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you're rating, liking, subscribing to the YouTube page. Let me know. Get in the comments. Talk to me about what you think about this episode, what you think about my rankings, what you think about the new radio broadcast, anything. I love the feedback. I love hearing from you. Appreciate you listening. And I will look forward to talking to you again on Friday.